Welcome back to the Black Human Infrastructure channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to help us so we can grow in our community. Is self-hating Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas a dangerous white supremacy tool? Has he allowed himself to be used to derail the progress of Black America and Black people worldwide? I think so. Clarence Thomas, born June 23, 1948, is an American jurist, someone who is an expert in or writer on law. He serves as an associate judge of the Supreme Court of the United States. He was nominated by George H.W. Bush to succeed Thurgood Marshall and has served since 1991. So for 31 years, this dangerous plant, aka Manchurian candidate to his race for white supremacy, Clarence Thomas, have allowed and have been a big problem for Black people. Thomas was born in Pinpoint, Georgia, a small predominantly Black community near Savannah, founded by freedmen after the Civil War. He was the second of 3 children born to M.C. Thomas, a farm worker, and Leola Pigeon Williams, a domestic worker. They were the descendants of slaves, and the family spoke Gula or Gila as a first language. Gula, also called Gullah English, Sea Island Creole English, Geechee, is a Creole language spoken by the Gula people within the community, an African American population living in coastal regions of South Carolina and Georgia, including urban Charleston and Savannah, as well as extreme northeastern Florida and the extreme southeast of North Carolina. So Clarence Thomas was born and bred in a community with such strong, rich African roots, who then grew up to be so opposed to what he is, and the choices and decisions he made will forever dishonor his ancestors. How can a man from one of the original descendants of slaves choose to live a life of self-hate and extreme prejudice against his own people? As a 43-year-old with barely 1 year of experience as a judge under his belt, Clarence Thomas was quite young and inexperienced when George H.W. Bush picked him to be SCOTUS. Thomas was appointed to the Supreme Court in 1991 after a contemptuous confirmation hearing where he was accused of sexual misconduct by Anita Hill. Anita Hill was called before the Judiciary Committee and testified that 10 years after Thomas had subjected her to comments of lewd sexual nature, which she felt constituted sexual harassment. In her words, behavior that is unfitting an individual who will be a member of the court. Hill's testimony included lurid details, and some senators, low-key racist Joe Biden, questioned her aggressively. Hill accused Thomas of, among other things, making 2 sexual offensive remarks to her. He compared his own penis to that of Long Dong Silver, a Black porn star. Wow. Angela Wright, who worked under Thomas at the EEOC before he fired her, decided not to testify. She submitted a written statement alleging that Thomas had pressured her for a date and had made comments about the anatomy of women. Sakari Hardnett, a former Thomas assistant, wrote to the Senate committee that although Thomas had not harassed her, if you were young, Black, female, and reasonably attractive, you knew full well you were being inspected and auditioned as a female. Yuck. For a span of 32 years, Clarence Thomas' entire stare decisis decisions have always been to uphold laws that slow down or stop Black America's progress. Laws like federalism, whose disadvantages include protecting slavery and segregation, increasing inequality between states, state blocking national policies that affect how states see it fit to treat their citizens. Give Ron DeSantis from Florida a minute. He's on his way to make slavery great again, thanks to Long Dong Silver, Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is also against the 14th Amendment, often considered as one of the most consequential amendments. It addresses citizenship rights, equal protection under the law, and was proposed in response to issues related to former slaves from the American Civil War. Remember, he is from Pinpoint, Georgia, founded by former slaves. His native language is Gullah. How deep is this self-hate and hatred for the Black race? Thomas' law decisions are aligned with racist Antonin Scalia, who, in his own words, I am one of a small number of judges, small numbers of anybody, judges, professors, lawyers, who are known as an originalist. An originalist constitutionalist believed that racial segregation was constitutional law from 1877 to 1954. Per Sam Fullwood from Center for America Progress, Scalia displayed a joyous cherubed face while he wielded an intellectual howitzer, a weapon, to blast away the hard-earned legal support for racial opportunity that briefly followed the civil rights movement. The list is long and damning, reflecting a view of jurisprudence that is, to put mildly, racially insensitive to Black and other historically disadvantaged Americans. For example, in the 2013 Shelby County versus Holder opinion, Scalia voted with the conservative majority, agreeing against the evidence and logic that the Voting Rights Act was a perpetuation of racial entitlement for Blacks and other racial minority voters. In a series of affirmative action cases, Justice Scalia showed his true colors, vehemently opposing any use of racial consideration in college admissions. His concurrent opinion in the 2014 Shute versus Bam decision not only rejects the program to level imbalances in America's society, but also decries previous court decisions supporting affirmative action as a sorry line of race-based admission decisions. Wow. In another example, oral arguments in a case challenging affirmative action, Justice Scalia questioned the capacity of Black college students that they can do well at prestigious white university, suggesting they might do better at a slower track school. Who would want any of that? Clarence Thomas. He is against affirmative action that seek to achieve goals such as bridging inequalities in employment and pay, increasing access to education, promoting diversity, and redressing apparent past wrongs, harms, or hindrance. Clarence Thomas is against all of that. His dissents and disagree with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. a landmark piece of federal legislation in the United States that prohibits racial discrimination in voting, aiming to overcome legal barriers at the state and local levels that prevent Black Americans from exercising their rights to vote. So this porch coon is against a landmark law that enshrined the rights to keep Black people free, because if Black people cannot vote, Black people have no rights, and no rights mean back into slavery. I guess him thinking marrying that glacier beast and wearing that black robe will make him untouchable if the unthinkable. Okay, I digress. Per the Daily Mail, Black Georgia Democrat Senator Emmanuel Jones has called Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas a Uncle Tom who sold his soul to the slave master. This is regarding Thomas getting a statue over a real freedom fighter, John Lewis. Excuse me. There's a whole laundry list of positions that Clarence Thomas has taken that I find offensive, said Jones. Sometimes when I talk to the Republican Party, I say, y'all don't get it. That term we use is called Uncle Tom. And Uncle Tom talks about a person who, back during the days of slavery, sold his soul to the slave master or masters. Per Senator Nan Orrock of Atlanta, his service is problematic. There's a cloud over his service, and that cloud continues today. Thomas' concurrent opinion last year to overturn the landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade decision that established nationwide access to women care. In that opinion, he called on his fellow justices to revisit other Supreme Court precedents that legalize interracial marriage and access to contraception. That must be Clayton Bigsby's way of trying to annul his marriage, because that makes no sense. That makes no sense. Per a Vox interview with Clarence, we talked about the many contradictions in Clarence Thomas's life, how he became an unlikely champion of modern conservatism, aka modern KKK approval, and why he still does not believe in racial progress. Of course he doesn't. He's against any progress, any progressive stride Black America makes. He is the proverbial crab in a barrel mentality. He is the only one that should be able to climb out of the barrel and then pull the ladder up behind him so other blacks, especially liberals or Democrat voting blacks, will stay the fuck down. Don't forget his dissents and disagreements of law that directly impact Black America daily life. Of course he's against it. The husband of a white nationalist, Ginny Thomas, who helped plan a coup against the American government by way of an insurrection, Clarence Thomas, is a dangerous plant in the Supreme Court against the rights, liberty, and freedom of Black America. He does not believe in the Establishment Clause that serves two primary functions. First, it prevented Congress from establishing a federal religion. Second, it prevents Congress from interfering with established state religions. Per Ball and Strike, Clarence Thomas, supported by a cadre of mostly white conservative academics, argues that because the Establishment Clause serves primarily to delineate between state and federal power, applying it to states simply does not make sense. And so, per Thomas and his ilk, not only can a high school football coach pray after football games, but the state government could declare Christianity the only true religion of the state, Washington state. But question, What happened when those conservative Christian lawmakers decide to make racism the one true religion in America? Then what, Clayton Bigsby, Clarence Thomas? Then what? You are so steep in your hate for your black skin and race. Your delusion of grandeur make you think that Black Road will protect you when white supremacy turns on you. Per ball and strike, he is not interested in protecting against the establishment of state religion because he is not interested in a pluralistic society, equal society. He's interested in building a regime of political, cultural, and social domination. That's why he has argued for the near total erasing of student speech rights, the dismantlement of affirmative action, and the aggressive curtailment of civil liberties during wartime. He would like to see the social hierarchies he envisioned in his mind reflected back at him in our government. Clarence Thomas would like to see the social hierarchies he envisions in his mind reflected back at him. Let that sink in. Per the Rockefeller Foundation, racist inequalities in America are baked deep into the fabric of our society. Public policies, business practices, and power structure. They permeate our criminal justice system, health system, and our food system. And more than 150 years after the end of legal slavery, they still define so much of the inequalities in our economic system. The persistent gap isn't the only factor contributing to America's racial hierarchy, but it's one of the most glaring indicators of an unjust system. In fact, the racial wealth gap put Black people, families, and communities at a disadvantage, limiting their economic power and promoting cyclical effects, with nearly 70% of middle-class Black children likely to fall out of the middle class as adults. And Clayton Bigsby, aka Clarence Thomas, is in complete support of this social hierarchy. He envisioned to reflect back at him at the expense and cost of Black America. Harriet Tubman had to leave some of us behind, and he is a clear modern-day slave that has sold his soul to the masters of the very system put in place to suppress every progress made by Black people in this country and worldwide. In case America doesn't know that, Black America doesn't know that, every law put in place in America affect all of us, every Black, worldwide. Again, I digress. He was chosen by George H.W. Bush for a reason, because he is a malleable Manchurian candidate pick-me who is against the advancement of his race. And he wears it like a badge of honor, with no regards for the harm he has caused and is still causing. To be in the circle he traverses in require one to give up too much of themselves, one's soul, one dignity, just to be a pick-me-sha for white supremacy. And by the way, Virginia, Ginny, married to Clarence Thomas, denounced a DC area Black Lives Matter banner. Per Oath Keeper Ginny, Black Lives Matter is a Trojan horse of mob rule and cultural revolution, Ginny Thomas wrote in an email to Clifton, Virginia officials per the Washington Post. Let's not be tricked into joining cause with radical extremists seeking to foment a cultural revolution because they hate America. Oh, the irony, Jenny. Girl. But you hate Black America. And you incited a whole treasonous insurrection because you didn't like that black people voted in predominantly black areas and gave Joe Biden a win. How dare those N-words? Stop the steal. Clayton Bigsby. Lay down at night next to it. Wake up with it. She steers the teacup with her racist oath keeper spoon. And he tap danced and jigaboo his ass right up to the Supreme Court to do the bidding of his masters, to erase any and every precedent that keep black people free and fair. Make it make sense. Never sleep on the system. Stay woke, black folks.